Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition, and it's a pleasure to be joined once again by Daniel Blackham, sports editor at the Mirror US. But more importantly for this episode, a Brentford fan. Daniel, welcome back. How are you keeping? You well?
Thanks very much. Yeah, happy to be back. Happy to be back in a more positive way than my last appearance, talking about Wissa. So should be all good.
Yeah, well, I would like to say I really hope that we'd be talking about Wissa already having maybe 6, 7, 8 goals to his name. He hasn't even had 6, 7 or 8 minutes to his name so far. So that's gone wonderfully well. And let's just start with Wissa, because there was some talk that he might be back for this game, and that was always more hope than expectation. But when we spoke in the summer, you were very positive about him. It was a bit of a therapy session for you because you didn't want to see him go. You thought he handled it all badly, etc., etc. But one of the things that came out of that episode was that his fitness is relatively good. He doesn't really get injured all that much, and yet arrives on Tyneside, picked up an injury, and we're yet to see him.
I mean, I think that in that case, it's very much, you can compare a lot to Alexander Isak. I mean, I feel bad saying his name on this podcast, but you look at the two of them, neither of them had a pre-season, and then they both jump into playing competitive football, and all of a sudden, well, I mean, Wissa, I think it was his first game back when he was away on international duty, and first game he picks up an injury. It's kind of to be expected. The fact that he didn't really get much of a pre-season at all, didn't train much, get any competitive minutes before playing in what was, playing for his country. It must be like a high stakes game for him, one that he's putting a lot of energy into. So you can almost say it was probably coming. It was probably the writing was on the wall there. I mean, I know there was rumours about an ACL injury there, or there being something to do with his ACL. I'm not too sure what the actual situation is there, but I mean, from my point still stands that when he comes back, he should be fine. He's not like an injury-prone player. But yeah, it's rather unfortunate for Newcastle, and I think for a few Brentford fans, he's not going to be available on Sunday.
Well, that was the kind of small bit of positivity that I was going to ask you to provide when it comes to Wissa, that everything's going to be okay when he returns, and hopefully the goal-scoring machine that we thought Newcastle United bought will shine through. Sunday then, 12th versus 13th, and I'll be honest with you, Daniel, when Keith Andrews took over and replaced Thomas Frank, I had Brentford down to finish 19th in the Premier League. I thought that was it. They'd lost so many good players in the summer as well, on top of their manager. And yet Keith Andrews has come in and he's done a relatively good job.
He has, yeah. I mean, I'm willing to hold my hands up and say I was completely wrong about him. I was worried when he was appointed. I thought for such a period of transition that Brentford were in, losing club captain, 2 best strikers, losing the goalkeeper as well. No, that's not as much of a major thing, and head coach. You need experience in there, was my point of view. I thought you needed a manager who had experience of sort of building a team and leading a team, as it were, whereas Keith Andrews had 0 competitive games as a head coach under his belt. He came from being our set-piece coach. There was a lot said about the fact that he went for the MK Dons job last season and didn't get it. So there was a lot of negativity around him. But yeah, I mean, he's proved everyone wrong. And I think as well that the tag that he's got of being a manager who, Brentford play for set pieces and play for throw-ins and that sort of thing, I think that's quite unfair to him. In some ways, I think they've actually defended very well, and they've looked good going forward as well. There's been a few dodgy games. Let's say Fulham away, for example, was a real low point where I suddenly thought, oh no, is this where it all goes downhill quite fast? But then you look at the Man United game, you look at the Liverpool game, and they've been able to actually take the game to opposition rather than just reacting to games, if you know what I mean.
And I guess that noise and assumption that it's one-way traffic and it's down to the championship can be used as a bit of added extra motivation. The same when you sign Jordan Henderson, everyone says he's past it, and yet he's come in and had a relatively good start to life at the GTech as well. That's all those kind of negativities that can be used inside a dressing room to provide positive results. Are they looking at this one on Sunday as a game that they fancy themselves in, Brentford?
I'd like to think so, mainly just because of Newcastle's away form. I think that's a major thing for us. I think that, if you're looking at the same game at St James's Park, there's a lot less positivity from the Brentford end, I'd say. But I think, looking at how good Brentford have been at home at times this season, they've really blown teams away, even if the scoreline perhaps doesn't quite reflect it. And putting 3 past Liverpool, putting 3 past Man United. There's no reason why they should go into Sunday with fear, let's say, especially when you look at Newcastle at West Ham last time out, and you think, okay, well, Brentford went to West Ham and it looked like men against boys. So, what's happening here? I definitely think that this Sunday is a game that, there will be certain things about this Sunday. I don't think that set pieces will come into play as much. When you look at, the Newcastle defence being very tall and physical, the long throws could be dealt with quite easily by the likes of Dan Burn if it comes to it. But at the same time, I just think that Brentford are in a very good position at the moment to actually get a win on Sunday.
So you mentioned there the set pieces and how maybe they won't play as big a part in this game. What else are we expecting from Brentford in terms of their approach to this game?
Well, everyone seems to say about Brentford that they play for set pieces. I'm not too sure how a team can necessarily play for set pieces. I mean, Brentford's aim is always to get the ball in the net. That's always the aim. It's not like they're going to sacrifice an attack because they think they might win a throw in and that sort of thing. So that sort of tag I think is a little bit unfair to give to Brentford. When you look at it, I think that a lot's going to depend on what type of team he puts out on Sunday. That's been the sort of defining thing of his reign as head coach so far. Fans got really upset when he started playing 5 at the back, and they didn't look as good going forward. That horror game against Fulham when they played 5 at the back and didn't change it. Whereas when they play 4 and they play three attackers, it's been a completely different style of game whatsoever. So you can imagine that they're going to play slightly on the counter, I would imagine, just simply because of how good Newcastle can be. And you never know, this might be the game where it clicks for Newcastle and all of a sudden, they find themselves 4-0 up at half-time and that sort of thing. That could be the case. But you would imagine that Newcastle will try and get a fairly decent amount of the ball, which would lead to Brentford counter-attacking with pace. Dango Otara on the wing, Kevin Sade on the wing, and Igor Thiago up front, I think, will be the key man in disrupting that Newcastle backline on Sunday. But again, the throw-ins and the set pieces, that sort of thing will come into it. But for the large part, I would like to think that it'll be sort of quick counter-attacking play from Brentford. That could be where they hurt Newcastle.
See, that does fill me with dread slightly. If Newcastle have to have more of the ball and have to kind of look to control the game, because I just don't think they're capable at it at the moment, and they are better when they have to counter sides. But if a side sits with that low block, then Newcastle United really do struggle to break them down. We saw that against West Ham. So I'm dreading this one ever so slightly. What we have seen, especially on the road, is that teams do exploit what tends to be gaps behind the midfield 3 of Newcastle and in front of the back 4. West Ham did that, Brighton did that. Is that something where you think, if Eddie Howe hasn't come up with the solution, that Brentford would look to target as well?
Well, I mean, they definitely can. If anything, the one big difference, I think, from Brentford last season to this season has been Mikkel Damsgaard. And that's not to say he's not played well this season, but, he was player of the season last year. He really came into his own, and, there were some sort of tenuous links with top 6 clubs at the end of last season because of how well he was playing. This season, it's been a little bit different. He hasn't been that key difference maker. He's still played well. It's not that he's had a significant drop off. It's just that there's been less of an over-reliance on him. But that's the sort of game where you think if there is going to be a gap between the midfield 3 and the back line of Newcastle, that is exactly where he'll operate. And that's where you might see him sort of pick up the ball and play it out wide to Otara, to Sade, play it through the middle to Thiago. And also, if Newcastle play a high line, then Jordan Henderson's going to play a massive role because the way that he's been able to ping the ball over the top this season has been incredible. You saw it with the goal against Newcastle, the goal against Man United that Thiago scored, the way that he's been playing it over the top for the wingers to run onto. That sort of area of the pitch is one where Brentford haven't had to utilise it a lot this season, but Damsgaard's definitely one to look out for if they do.
Just to emphasise the point about having more of the ball, I mean, Newcastle against West Ham had 62.6% possession, West Ham 37.4%, and we all know how that one ended up. Newcastle just struggle at the moment to really dominate a game where they are given the ball to play with. So certainly something that I think Brentford will be looking to exploit. I mean, you mentioned there a few players. I mean, who in particular should we be looking out for? Who do you think the one man that Eddie Howe will be earmarking as the danger man?
I mean, to pick one is difficult. I mean, so many players this season have played incredibly well. The midfield two of Yarmiluk and Jordan Henderson playing just in front of that back line. They're the ones who will disrupt if Newcastle try and get on the ball on Sunday. They're the two who will be breaking up play and trying to get it forward quickly. But Thiago this season, Igor Thiago, has been fantastic, and he can cause real problems for Newcastle. He's he's strong, he's quick, he's good at holding up the ball and letting others come into play as well. I think that he's the type of player who, no defender's going to like playing against him because he is so strong. He doesn't really have a weak spot. He's good at finishing. He's, I think only Erling Haaland scored more than him in the Premier League this season. I think that's still the case, or it was last time I checked. I mean, he's, you talk about a Johan Wissa replacement and the pressure that was on him this season. He's done that he's come on leaps and bounds simply over the course of the last sort of 10 games, from where he started the season to now, and he's going into Sunday in red hot form. Even if you take away the goals, the impact he has on that team, he's fantastic. And then you look at Michael Coyote, the right back, who I believe there were some links with Newcastle before he actually joined Brentford. So it's a case of showing them what they're missing this Sunday, because he brings the ball into play so well. He bombs down the right flank so well. He can invert, and as I say, his long throw-ins will terrify any defence in the league. So there's quite a few to look out for.
And who will be playing in front of your right back there? Because obviously Dan Burn will be left back for Newcastle United, and that tends to be the area that many people do target. So who will it be going up against?
So that'll be Dango Otara, I would imagine, playing on the right wing. He was the sort of like for like Brian Mbeumo replacement, even going so far as to wear the same shirt number. So it's quite difficult, I find, as a fan, not to directly compare them, because they're not the same player. Dango likes to drift inside quite a bit more. He doesn't have the exact same pace. He's a lot stronger than Brian Mbeumo was. This season, he's been the one player that I've kind of expected more from, and that may be harsh on him, but that's simply due to the £42 million price tag that Brentford paid for him. So I think that if it's the case that Dan Burn is the weak spot in the Newcastle team, this could be a week for Otara to really sort of announce himself, and that's definitely going to be something that I'm sure Keith Andrews will be looking at as well. When you talk about playing those balls in behind and using his pace.
One to watch out. It's certainly going to be a very interesting battle. Just to remind our ladies and gents, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. Do click the link in the podcast description box to get a discount offer on your NordVPN plan. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Support the podcast and keep yourself safe while browsing on public Wi-Fi. Just looking at the stats there, Dan, you've got 11 wins out of the last 17 at the GTech against sides outside of London. So what is it about the GTech and anyone that isn't in the capital visiting?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew what it is that sort of makes them play so well at the GTech. I mean, if you want to look at the psychology of it, it's quite a small stadium compared to the rest of the Premier League, and that's not me saying it's so loud and intense that teams get scared. But you just look at how small and intimate it is. Brentford they must feel so comfortable there, and everything's boxed in, everything's there for them. There must be something in that they genuinely just seem to feel so comfortable there. And I'm sure that some of those defeats that you would look at in that time, I can think of a few towards the end of last season that if one decision goes the other way, then all of a sudden it's a Brentford win, and some of those wins, even that could have been more. I mean, they could have realistically put more past Man United, put more past Liverpool. So it's really been the case of, much like it was towards the start of last season, where the home form is going to be vital in setting up that base. And to be perfectly honest, I can't for the life of me figure out why teams don't like coming here, because I mean, it's not like there's a massively intimidating atmosphere or anything like that. It just seems to be that it's Brentford's comfort. That's what, and that bleeds into the way that the clubs run. The clubs run as a sort of everyone's in it together vibe. That's why Keith Andrews was such an obvious pick looking back on it, because they wanted the continuation. They wanted everything to sort of remain set as it was. And that's how I view a little bit of the home form as well.
It's going to be interesting to see if Newcastle United can get the better of them. We've talked about Brentford's positives. We've talked about the players to watch out for. But what is the one weakness that you think Newcastle will be exploiting or trying to exploit on Sunday?
Famous last words, but I can't think of any. I honestly can't think of a weakness. And I think that a lot of that comes down to Jordan Henderson. I don't know how long we've got on this recording, but I could go on for hours and hours and hours about Jordan Henderson. Best signing Brentford have made since 2019, honestly. He's absolutely brilliant. And you look at the way that when you just watch him on the pitch, you can see him shouting at everyone, telling everyone what to do. And that's his experience that we don't have in the dugout. That's the experience on the pitch. And for that reason, that's why I say that I can't see an obvious weakness in the Brentford team, because you think of how they set up defensively, and Jordan Henderson's a massive part of that. And then the attack speaks for itself. You've got Kevin Schade and Thiago, who both been fantastic this season. Reece Nelson could get minutes this weekend. He looked good in the cup last week against Grimsby. So I think it all comes down to how well Jordan Henderson sits in that team and orchestrates the team. Even though he doesn't wear the armband, he's the leader on the pitch for Brentford. And for that reason, I can't see a weakness. It's not like last season where I remember talking and we didn't have the fullbacks in place and there was a few makeshift players. That issue's been corrected now. We've got a better goalkeeper than last season. Kelleher is fantastic. The centre backs are both fantastic. It's famous last words, I know, but there is no obvious weakness in this Brentford team.
Fantastic. That's just the real positive answer that I wanted. Thanks for that, Dan. I was looking to try and grasp at something, because I can see quite a few weaknesses from Newcastle United's point of view. There may be no Anthony Gordon on Sunday. He's a doubt. There is no Wissa, as mentioned, no Johan Wissa either. Is there anyone other than Anthony Gordon? Because I think you probably picked Anthony Gordon last time out as the man you feared the most. So who else springs to mind?
I mean, last season I remember saying how terrified I was of Alexander Isak, and I don't remember him playing, or if he did, he was fairly ineffective, to be perfectly honest. This weekend, to be fair, I mean, the thing that I fear the most is just how well Newcastle will deal with the set pieces. And again, I know that I've said that Brentford aren't a set piece team, but realistically, they do have that threat from set pieces. And if Newcastle are able to nullify that completely, with putting one of the tall centre backs or Dan Burn on the front post and just clearing every throw in that comes in, that's going to be something that Brentford should really be worried about, because then the emphasis shifts entirely onto breaking down the Newcastle defence and managing to suck in the Newcastle defence so that you can play balls over the top. Looking going forward, I know that Nick Woltemade is brilliant. I am worried about him, but to be perfectly honest, I view him completely differently to how I viewed Isak last season. When Brentford played Newcastle last season, it was very much playing him was like playing against Haaland. It was like you knew that at some point he was going to get a chance, and he was probably going to put it away. This season with Woltemade, I think he brings something different to the Newcastle team, and this may be slightly ignorance from me, where I haven't seen as much of him. But there's more of a hold-up play and bringing balls into play, and I know that his finishing is brilliant, but he just doesn't strike me with the same fear that Isak did last season. But again, that could be yet more famous last words as he bags his third on 35 minutes on Sunday. So,
well, fingers crossed, because he is my captain in my fantasy team, and I would love that to happen. There are a host of players you could have picked for that answer. Sancho, Gnarly, Bruno Guimaraes. But the issue is for Newcastle at this present point that when they are on the road, when they are away from home, these world-class players just are not the same. Nowhere near the level that they produce at home in the Champions League against the so-called top six at St James's Park. That is when they are at their best, and that's where the tags of world-class come when we talk about Tonali or Bruno Guimaraes or the best midfield three in the Premier League when we talk about Joe Linton alongside them two. But we haven't seen evidence of that away from home, which is rather worrying, to say the least. And this is why it seems strange coming into this game on the back of 7 wins out of the last 10, I think it is, in all competitions. They were just won the Champions League. And yet for me, I'm fearing this one. I'm dreading it, because players away from St James's Park are not the same players they are at home, and that's a massive issue. And I have to be honest, Dan, a reason why I'm betting on Brentford to win this one.
Well, I mean, you mentioned them there, Bruno Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali in the midfield, and I think last season I would have picked them because Brentford weren't as strong in the middle of midfield. Whereas this time around, I don't think that there'll be the opportunities for them to get on the ball around the penalty area and sit on the ball and have that 5 seconds to think about where the pass is going or think about how to thread past the defence. Purely because of how good Yarmolenko and Henderson have been this season. I definitely think it will be the case that if Newcastle tried to get on the ball too much around that gap between the penalty area and the halfway line, where they could theoretically cause problems, I think that's where you're going to see how good Henderson and Yarmolenko are in breaking up play and quickly transitioning to attack. So that's why I didn't pick them, because again I just don't think that they're going to have the same opportunities as they will against other teams because of how good those midfield two have been, and that then brings into play why they haven't been on it away from home, and obviously that's something that only Eddie Howe and the players on the pitch will actually know why that's the case. But on Sunday they'll definitely be in for a rude awakening if they think they can just sort of spray passes around the middle of midfield.
Well, that's all we need. Next, a Sunderland captain at the edges. What is he? 35, 36? Marshall in that midfield.
Like a 4-year-old.
Honestly, that definitely seems to have been a shrewd signing, to say the least. Come on, then. How is this one going to go?
I don't want to look back on this on Sunday night with egg on my face as Newcastle ran out 4-0 winners, but I honestly think this could be a statement from Brentford. I think this could be a real, if they go out and win this one 3-0, then that's to me almost a bigger statement than beating Liverpool and beating Man United, because you can look at those wins and say, well, against Liverpool they were in a rout, Man United they were in a rout, they're about to change goalkeepers. I know that Newcastle are as well, but if Brentford can go out and really damage Newcastle and give Kelleher a quiet afternoon, if there's sort of no real chances for Newcastle and Brentford go out and dominate the game, then that's a real statement win in my eyes, and that's what I think is going to happen. Fingers crossed, touch wood, that's the case. But I really think a 3-0 Brentford is not unrealistic on Sunday.
Fantastic. Well, wake me up on Monday morning having missed that game, and hopefully your score prediction does not ring true. But I am feeling this one. I can see Newcastle United losing to a similar scoreline as you've predicted. They're just not right, unfortunately, and there doesn't seem to be the personnel to change either the formation or just to do something a little bit different at this present point in time. So yeah, you have not filled me with any confidence that my fear of this game is misplaced. So thanks for that, Dan. I much appreciated. To you guys watching and listening, do get into the comments. Let us know your thoughts on Newcastle's game at Brentford on Sunday. Do you fear it as I do, or am I being a little bit too pessimistic? Do hit that link in the podcast description box for your NordVPN offer discounted for our listeners and viewers of the Everything is Black and White podcast. And I'll be back on Monday with the Monday show, hopefully celebrating 3 points for Newcastle United, although I'm not predicting it.